One of the first things that I want to get across to you is to remember, when you think inside of your head with the I voice, the conditioned mind voice, it is not all that you are. What human design gives us is an opportunity to develop our witness or our passenger consciousness. Passenger consciousness is the process of observing your body and its life, observing and witnessing how beautiful and wonderful life can be when you don't try to make what you think should happen from the mind standpoint happen. Because the moment that you believe with the mind story, now you are contaminated by all of the undefined activations, the open, dormant challenges, upsets, pain, and suffering that you have gone through in this life. And that little voice inside of your head, that constant critic, that thing that isn't necessarily who you are, is always giving a running commentary, a narrative, if you will. This should be like this, I wish that. Anything that is at odds with what's actually happening. So because the way the mind is structured is open, it's open to receiving information from the person sitting next to you, from the transits that are moving through you. What happens is we internalize that mind voice and over-identify or misidentify with what's moving through us. So the moment that you can let go of what's moving through you as something that you have to do something about from the mental standpoint, and the moment you can surrender to the body and its beingness, the way that it is designed to function, now we have a very different experience of life. And that's my wish for all of you. My desire is to convey this information in a way that helps it settle into your bones. It helps it ground into your being. And I do that through the knowledge of human design, teaching you the fundamentals of how this structure, this mandala, this body graph, the system works. So the first and most important thing to recognize is that the voice inside of your head, conditioned mind, is not who you are. Okay? It can never be the sum full totality of what you are, because you are so much more than that voice. So one of the first things that happens when you surrender to this vehicle, this body, your body relaxes. You start to settle down because your mind and its witnessing doesn't believe the negative, challenging upsets of the, blame and shame and guilt and fault that the mind comes up with, the rationalizations, the distortions. When you don't believe that running commentary, what happens is that you get a body that's more relaxed, and that takes time. It takes time to let go of the mind. It takes time for the body to settle down. It takes time to get comfortable in your own skin. So don't try and rush the process. Allow yourself to be the passenger, observing and witnessing life. Now, how we observe and witness life is from our ajna, the conceptualization function in our 9-centered body graph. So one of the first components of our classes is we're going to awaken your 9-centered awareness, taking you out of the 7-centered consciousness field and attempting to give you your own sovereignty, which is aligning to being your own authority. And so in this program, we're going to go deeper into the layers of your own design, your definition, what's defined, what's open. Help you know these from a deeper place, from the biological place as well, to give you clues and tools and techniques to recognize how you are this flowering of full potential in this body, in this form, your unique individual empowerment, your individuation. Now, when you look at the centers, all centers have a binary functioning of this and of that. They're either going to be defined in you or they're going to be undefined. When they're defined in you, they can function healthfully or not. When they're undefined, as in this picture, they can function healthfully or not. All centers have a binary function. So either they are going to be transmitting information when they are defined, broadcasting, if you will, or receiving information when they are undefined. They can be fixed or flexible. So as we go through this program, I'm going to help you recognize how you are fixed and how you are flexible and how that shows up in your life. Now, when we look at the centers, either defined or undefined, we have gates in our design. You can think of them as portals, if you will. Gates can be either conscious or unconscious, conscious or unconscious, out of an active center, meaning it's always turned on, or it can be conscious or unconscious in an undefined center, a dormant center. When we have dormant functions, dormant gates in a dormant function, what happens is this is where we go to school. This is what we are learning about, specific wisdom for others in this life. These are things that we give to others in our interactions with others. Yes, we too give this to others, but we're broadcasting that consistently. And this is an aspect, depending on where it's coming from, it's an aspect of what you're learning about as well. So you can give wonderful wisdom potential, or you can give horrible shadow self from the openness. When you believe your mind's story in the openness, and you make decisions based on what's moving through you because of your fears, your insecurities, your past pain and suffering, the conditioning, trying to prevent what happened to happen again. When you're making mental decisions, that's what happens when you're not allowing yourself to be who you are in this life. The full totality of what you be in this life comes from the definition itself. Now, reflectors, you have a different process. I'm talking about the 99% of the world who are defined, are solar beings. So, definition is the very basis of what you give, broadcast, be in the world. Undefined are these things that you're learning about and what can be offered inconsistently in life. Wisdom, when you let go of your mind's process of trying to make something specific happen out there in the openness. So what happens when you're in not self, why this happens, is because you're making decisions from bitterness, from resentment, from being frustrated, from being angry, from being disappointed. The very frequency that you give off when you're in this process means that you're operating or you're coming from not self, shadow state. So what happens is this identification with conditioning and using it to make decisions leads to the creation of a conditioned not self behavior, knee-jerk reactions, discomfort, dis-ease, challenge, pain, upset, shrinking inside, feeling worthless, feeling abandoned, all of these things that you're experiencing and then making mental decisions from are absolutely not your place of authority. That's why you're in not self, because no one taught you when you were a child how to access yourself, and that's what the Living Your Design Awakening process is here for. So if you're new to this, definitely I recommend going into that process. Now, the not self-conditioning field, the openness and the design, they always lie underneath the way the mind frames decision-making. So it will always amplify and distort anything that you have undefined in your body graph. And all of that will show up in your mind. We cannot separate ourselves from it. We can question every thought that we think, but those thoughts are still going to be thunk when it comes from this process of engaging with life. There's no shield that can prevent, let's say, currently wherever a planetary activation happens to be, Pluto as an example. Pluto just moved back into the gate of mystery, inner truth. So nothing can prevent you from amplifying Pluto's steamrolling over whatever activation you have there, or engaging with the other side of that strength of 24 and then having you process things inside of your head, thinking and coming to an awareness about things. Nothing can shield you. That's the conditioning field. It becomes not self when you make decisions because of what's moving through you, rather than what you can rely upon and what is trustworthy, your authoritative process. So true self behavior, your open centers then will not become blind genetic imperatives. Instead, they become places to develop wisdom that you give to others through being called, through being asked, through being recognized, through being invited. It's a vibrational frequency that you broadcast when your functions are clear of the conditioning as far as the decision-making from the openness. Your frequency changes. And the potential wisdom that is there in every single open center or function you have represents our outer authority. What is outer authority? When we talk about the nine-centered being, it is each of us have a unique, differentiated perspective that we can give to others cleanly, without drama, trauma, shame, guilt, regret, without manipulation, without distortion, without an agenda. There's the word. Outer authority is given from one person to another without an agenda, but from this nine-centered awakeness, which is operating in alignment, which is equals self-love, self-acceptance. So there is no question that each of us has access to our own personal sovereignty, our own personal integrity, our authenticity, and our authority. But how long we stay in that process depends. Depends on what's going on around us. It depends on how we're engaging with what's going on around us. It depends on where we are. It depends on how mature we are. It depends on what is going through our bodies at this moment or that moment, who we are with. It just depends. No one can stay in this state all the time that I'm aware of, that I can see, that I have experienced yet. But the more often that you spend in your sovereignty as your sovereign self, what I notice is that the more serendipity shows up in the life, the more ease, the more calm, the more grace. Not that those things are any better than the sadness or the confusion or the doubt. But human beings are very much attuned to wanting the pleasure over the pain, unless something happened for you to flip those two, to find pleasure in pain. So remember, every single one of us has access to being our own authority, and every single one of us has access to giving people our outer authority. And every single person has a process of unique, individual, personal authority. You're going to learn how that works when you take this class. Now, one of the keys to waking up, I have a little link to the Scientific American. If you're taking the course, you'll get the handout for this PDF. Scientific fact that what we think, say, and do is initiated long before the neocortex. Our awareness happens in the deep gray areas of the brain, Ross says, milliseconds before we are consciously aware of the thoughts. So the ashna, or conceptualization process, awareness is a reactive one, as it comes after a long chain of biochemical processes take place. And what the Scientific American reported on many years ago, what Neuroscience says about free will, quote, "We're convinced that it exists, but new research suggests it might be nothing more than a trick the brain plays on itself." So the key to waking up is letting go of your mind's thought process of judgment, self-recrimination, blame, shame, guilt, fault, regret, thinking that you had a choice when in fact perhaps you were helpless to or subject to challenges in the environment that had nothing to do with your worth and your value. So what happens here with the ajna, the conceptualization and the not self, is that this is the heart and soul of the dilemma of anybody who wants to wake up. Your mind's process. Who you think you are, what you think you should do, what happened to you in the past, what you think about what's going on right now. Your mind always wants to make decisions based on mental strategies it's developed through its relationship with the open centers. So whether you have a defined ajna or not, what happens is everything that goes on inside of your head about yourself, there's a voice that comes from all of the openness. That self-reflected consciousness, that voice is there. Are you going to believe that voice? It cannot be your inner authority. It is too polluted with outside information, stuff you picked up along the way from the moment you were born. From birth until now, you have been bombarded with all kinds of messages, and you were receiving all of these different processes that may not be supportive or helpful or vital or empowering or worth sharing with others. Definitely not making a decision about. But what the mind is good for is that it can help us recognize the patterns, the manifestations of our shadow state, our not self purpose. It's great at that. So that's my encouragement as far as attuning to your process of individuating through your body and recognizing through your mind how these things work. Things, I mean, your process of your authority and your shadow state. So what the not self-conditioning field looks like in the undefined center are all of these basic statements that you used and you learned in living your design. Example, ego center, trying to prove or improve yourself. And so if you make a decision from there, what happens is that the things that really matter are ignored because they don't attract you. Your genetic imperative, all of us have a propensity to try and connect up with things that we are not, people that we are not, mating with what we are not. We're attracted to others through conversations and things that we are not, and then making a decision because of what we take on from that other. When we think maybe this will be the last thing that I can try, in order to prove myself or to avoid confrontation or to know when enough is enough, all of those processes. So what happens when we bond with an other, it's based on our genetic interest in the other, our attraction to difference. There's an imperative in the openness. The genetic imperative is to reproduce. That's our first law. Go forth and multiply. Now, it's never personal when we're attracted to someone with a radically different design. When you start to analyze romantic relationship charts, you'll notice so many of them are like flipped, They have this center, the other person has the other center. They're like puzzle pieces that either create all of the puzzles pieces or mirror each other as far as one's defined and one's open. Because what happens is sameness is a dead-end street. Diversity is attractive to the genes. And your body needs to reproduce, so it's interested, it's curious. But the passenger is the witness of this life. The body, as far as its imprinting, is way more dominant, heavily weighted. W-E-I-G-H-T, heavy weight. It's important. But the mind itself is just watching. When you use the mind to make a decision, you're ignoring a huge amount of what your body is attuned to, here for. So what happens in the wisdom potential, in the undefined centers, is that this is where you're receptive, fluid, adaptable, learning to be wise. And you have potential wisdom for others the moment you let go of trying to make this openness something that's consistent inside of you, something that you have to make a decision about, something that you have to force down somebody else's throat, any of that. No decisions from the openness. In any of these open centers, this is where we grow. This is where we learn. This is where we're going to school. So if you look down at your body graph right now, you look at any dormant potentials, any activations that you have, those are little things that you give, depending on where it's coming from in your design. And these aspects of you in interaction with others are just as precious and valuable as your definition. It's just that the definition, the things that are colored in, are the only things that are reliable and trustworthy. And if you come to human design without this knowledge, for the most part, you've been ignoring your definition, taking it for granted. So in the openness is where the mind goes. So in the example of the wisdom potential here with an open heart, you can witness how your mind is developing wisdom. You're recognizing the world out there, who out there has the will to be competitive, to prove themselves, to support the tribe. Who out there can be in control? Who out there can deliver on promises? Who out there can be better or the best? Because that is your gift, out there. Not internalizing the mind's thought process in an attempt to make yourself feel better about any negative or negativity or perceived lack that your mind is complaining about, shaming you about, guilting you, faulting you about. So these conditioning receptors, either conscious or unconscious, a gate in an undefined center called a dormant potential, these receptors to conditioning get turned on. They get turned on anytime somebody comes into your field and hooks on that center. So too, anytime we are amplifying transits, the energies that are constantly bombarding us all day, every moment. So what happens in the undefined center is that there's an amplification and distortion. Then you overreact and then you misunderstand. When you believe the I voice inside of the head about the self, it's a chain reaction. The thing that stops that chain reaction is aligning to your decision-making strategy, your strategy and authority. So instead of amplifying and distorting, we could have a waiting and a correct focus. And that distortion and overreacting, instead of that, we have our strategy and authority to shield us, we can observe without evaluation, without taking action. And then instead of the overreaction and the misunderstanding, now with our strategy and authority, we can have the wisdom through correct awareness of outside, rather than internalizing. Because of the mind's process, it already does that. It says I, with any amplification and distortion. We are all very sensitive creatures, some of us more than others. When you're oblivious and you don't know this, you think with a thought that is not yours. And then you identify with that thought that is not yours. And then you make decisions with that thought that isn't even yours. Ra calls it gas of the brain, farts, your voice inside of your head about yourself. Question it, experiment and see. Now, a little bit of mechanics about the crystals of consciousness. We have 3 crystals. Personality crystal is affiliated with our self-reflected consciousness, our soul, if you will. The thing that reincarnates life after life after life, the thing that is eternal. That is your witness of this life and this experience and this human movie that we all live. The design crystal is of the earth, along with the magnetic monopole. The monopole literally sits in gate 2 here, where it sits. The design crystal and the monopole fitting together like a hand in glove. When you were conceived, these two separated and began building the body. Life's illusion of us being separate from the totality is created by this monopole separating those crystals, holding us together, holding the personality to this body as we fly through space and time, travelers in this experiential life movie. So these crystals each have a function in our body graph. Together, they create the form. And what we're here for is to surrender to the form now as 9-centered humans, to be your own authority. There's a little cartoon I like from Chaitanya Effects on Facebook. The lady saying, "Honey, can you please wake up our son?" And the Father says, you live in a biverse and you are here as a unique passenger to experience the life of the form. And your mind is not your authority. Maybe a little bit young to put it that way, but I agree. You are your own authority. No one, not your government, not your boss, not your husband, not your wife, not your child, not your parents, not anybody, has any authority over you, your sovereignty. So, the wisdom potential of correct conditioning, there is correct conditioning, what it does is it nourishes our designs, our connection personally to ourselves, our social relations, our global, planetary communion with others in this world, in this life. So how your mind controls you is through the voice inside of your head. I have some articles on my websites, humandesign.live, humandesignlifecoaching.com, thehumandesigsystem.com. Who's really in charge of your life is where I would suggest going if you haven't checked that out yet. And also the tribulations of not self-generosity. Those are also supportive. The handout will have the links for you there. And that's our key to waking up.